All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Dave, me and Nick here will be doing our Week 13 Black Friday games, Thanksgiving weekend games, whatever you want to call them, the midweek games of college football. We'll kick things off with the Egg Bowl, and we'll focus on some of the big games on Friday. Looking at this Egg Bowl, Mississippi State and Ole Miss. It's been a very interesting game since Mike Leach showed up. Lane Kiffin scored 31 points in each of the first two meetings. Two great personalities of head coaches. This is one of the most anticipated games every single year. Ole Miss coming off an interesting defeat to Arkansas, where they ran crazy. They ran for almost 500 yards, still lost 42-27. They gave up over 500 yards of their own. So Ole Miss defense, they only gave up 317 to Alabama. They played very good against the Crimson Tide, who are just a very inconsistent bunch at this moment in time. Because before that, they were giving up 500 yards to every offense they faced. And now they're facing a Mississippi State team that obviously has a very efficient passing attack. Kiffin's really had his number, Leach's number. He only scored 21 last year and then 24 before that. So this offense has not really clicked. Now they got to go on the road to Oxford. Will Rogers, almost 3,500 yards, 32 touchdowns, only 5 picks, 315 yards per contest for him. I think a big difference maker in this game, though, Nick, will be Mississippi State's running game. 3.7 yards per carry. It's pretty amplified compared to what they usually do in the past. They've been running the ball a little bit more this year, and I think they've been a little bit more effective in doing so. 2 400-yard rushers, Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks. They both have under 90 touches, so there's a pretty good numbers there. I really like this passing attack. I think they're coming to Oxford, and I think they'll get the job done here. The Ole Miss defense, they've got some strong individual players, guys like Troy Brown, that is, Kahari Coleman coming off the edge. Jared Ivey's really stepped up. But the most part, this is a veteran secondary for Ole Miss, but I do think Mississippi State, they're going to run the ball a little bit better than they have with how they've did that this year. I think they're going to run the ball very good in this game. I think they're going to be able to use some tempo, and I think they're going to start dissect this secondary. And I think Mike Leach will finally get his first win in the Egg Bowl here in his third try.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting matchup. I feel like Ole Miss has kind of lost a little bit of a step because of the Kiffin rumors. Kiffin potentially to Auburn, Kiffin, leaving Ole Miss. I think that's kind of gotten in the players' head. Of course, maybe they were a little too full of themselves considering their high ranking. They played Alabama close, but they still lost, and they absolutely dropped an egg against Arkansas this weekend and lost to them. Certainly love Ole Miss's offense top to bottom. Judkins is just having an incredible year for a freshman. Almost 1,400 yards on the ground, plus the 16 touchdowns for him on the ground. But when I look at this Mississippi State offense, I love what they can do. The balance has been great this year. This is a team that normally is only throwing the ball, right? They don't really carry the ball. And when you look at the numbers, 77 yards, seems like a low number. But for Mississippi State, that's not a bad average to have. And the yards passing, 321.2 yards through the air per game. I think State has just enough in them to win this game on Thursday. Great game on Thanksgiving, a very fun matchup. A game that's got a lot of eyes on it because of the time it's played late in the evening Thanksgiving. People don't really watch the NFL anymore. They go on to flip to this game. I like Mississippi State in this one. I just think that their offense has a little more momentum. We saw the offense from Ole Miss just absolutely get struggle in the second half against Alabama last week. And they struggled against Arkansas to put points on the board. Yes, they had a good day on the ground, but they couldn't really put points on the board. I think penalties killed them as well. They just seem to be a little undisciplined, lost their head a little bit. I think Mississippi State wins this matchup.
Now forwarding to the first game of Friday, on Black Friday, 12 p.m., Tulane-Cincinnati, a ranked matchup. UCF owns the tiebreaker for both of those teams. Unless they lose to USF on Saturday, UCF will be playing the winner of this contest. The Bearcats, 3-point favorites. Tulane's passing attack. I picked them to beat UCF, and Michael Pratt just was not that good. 59% completion rate. He did have 3 touchdowns. They were just not very efficient. They weren't very effective. Pratt this season, though, that's been kind of the opposite part of the script. He's got 65% comp rate, 222 yards a game. He's got 20 touchdowns and 4 picks. He's also a great runner with 9 touchdowns and 317 yards. Tajay Spears is a complete difference maker. He's 4 yards shy of hitting the century mark, or the 1,000-yard mark, that is. 12 touchdowns for him. They use him a lot as a pass catcher as well. It's a very deep, versatile receiving group for Tulane, Tyrek James, Shea Wyatt, but they don't ever seem to really click the way they should. And it's going to be really tough here against the Cincinnati secondary led by Jaquan Shepard and Arquan Bush, Javon Hicks. This is a very good secondary, only allowing a 54% completion rating for the opponents. Cincinnati's defense, this is a Power 5 type defense. They've proven that under Luke Fickell. Again, they're having a phenomenal season, led by Ivan Pace, coming over to join his brother Deshaun. And Ivan from Miami of Ohio has been elite. 107 tackles, 19 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. It's been a complete enforcer for them in the middle. And, Nick, this is a team in Tulane that's a balanced offense. 190 yards rushing. Of course, Pratt's 222 through the air. This is a defense that I think is really going to do very well here against Tulane. considering they struggled at home against UCF's defense, which is, I'd say a bit worse than Cincinnati's. I think that the Cincinnati offense, though, Ben Bryant's been very up and down this year, 250 yards per game for him, 20 touchdowns, 7 picks. They do have a respectable rushing game of about 130 yards per game. Charles McClellan, Corey Kenner, they get a few guys involved there. And, I thought the Tulane secondary, that's one of the nation's best, in terms of numbers. I thought they would play better against UCF. They didn't for the most part. It was really hard for them to get a stop. They only allowed 132 yards. But, the misdirection, the versatility of that offense really threw them off guard. So I do think they played very well against the pass. They lived up to expectations in that one. And I think they'll do pretty good in this one. Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Jaden Thompson, 3 guys that are full of speed that can really win downfield. This is a tough game to pick, Nick. There's a lot on the line here on Black Friday. I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I'm going to pick their defense to get the edge here because I just was not very impressed with Tulane, how they played in New Orleans against UCF a couple weeks ago. Cincinnati's offense has been a very inconsistent unit for me, but I think they'll do just enough to get by here to kick off Black Friday.
I'm gonna take Tulane in this game. I think it is disappointing they lost to UCF. That was definitely not a great showing, but against SMU on Thursday, I was really impressed. They put up 59 points against SMU. It was a solid day across the board. I like Pratt a lot. Having a good season with 2,220 yards plus 20 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Spears gonna eclipse that 1,000 mark very soon. 12 touchdowns for him. I love the balance between these two teams. Tulane 35 points per game, Cincinnati 31 points per game, both giving up 19 points per game. I just think that Tulane has a little bit more of an advantage on offense, and I just think that their secondary can compensate just enough to protect against that Cincinnati offense and be able to stop them when it matters most. I think Bryant's not a bad quarterback, but the 7 interceptions concerns me a little bit. I think he'll throw a pick or two against this Tulane secondary. That's not bad at all. Very solid secondary. I think that's going to be the key for me in this game. I think the secondary is going to make Bryant uncomfortable, and they're going to make some mistakes, and Tulane will get away with a win here and play UCF in a rematch for this conference title.
Game at 12 p.m. on FS1, Baylor versus Texas. This is a very inconsistent Baylor team. I picked them to lose to TCU by just a couple of points, and that's ended up what happened. They lost at the buzzer by a point on a field goal. And it's just because this team has been very inconsistent this year. They put up only 3 points against Kansas State. West Virginia, the defense completely got throttled in that one. Oklahoma gave up 500 yards also in that contest. The defense has been very strange. They still have that dominance on the defensive line, though. Jackson Player, Gabe Hall, Ika, this is a very good defensive line, but that, it's a very inexperienced offensive line for Texas, but it has played pretty well this season. I do think that Texas's ability to stop the run this year has been very impressive as well. And Baylor, this is a very good rushing attack. They've put up 230 plus yards in 4 of the last 5. Had only 103 a dud against Kansas State, but this is a very good rushing attack. Richard Reese, Craig Williams, Quaylen Jones. This is a versatile as it gets. But I think Texas this year, Nick, they've been really good against the run. Kendra Coburn, Tamondre Sweat. This is a good defensive line on the interior. Demario Overshown, Jalen Ford, some guys in the front 7 really stepped up. And Barron Sorrell, he's really emerged here late in the year as a complete game changer. Quinn Ewers, for me, he obviously had a great game against Alabama back in week 2. Came back from injury, was pretty flawless against Oklahoma. Since then, though, it's not been good at all. He had 38% comp rate, 3 picks against Oklahoma State. All these road games he struggled in. At Kansas State, he was not good. Here at Kansas, just this last Saturday, only 107 yards and 57%. Bijan Robinson carried the way with 243 and 4 scores. I think Baylor's ability to stop the run is obviously something very notable, but I think Texas will manage it quite well, and I think they'll slow down this inconsistent Baylor offense. And I'll pick them to win 31-20. This one's really a toss-up for me, especially with how poor Ewers has been. But I think Texas's defense will certainly step up in this game, a very underrated unit for the Horns, and I think they'll get the job done to wrap up the regular season.
Certainly playing at home plays a factor in this for me. I think Texas at home has that advantage. I think Bijan Robinson having an incredible year, 1,400 yards on the ground plus 16 touchdowns. Xavier Worthy, Quinn Ewers' favorite target, 46 catches, 614 yards plus the 9 scores. This Texas run defense, giving up 125 yards per game on the ground, very key for me. I think they're gonna be able to stop Reese on Saturday. He's having a great season, but I think this Texas defense just has enough energy here to stop this Baylor team. Baylor's been so inconsistent; they've been hit or miss. Putting up 3 points against Kansas State, it's just unacceptable after putting up 38, 45, and 35 in the weeks prior. Had a good showing against TCU, but obviously, TCU is just a really good team, so no shame in that loss this past weekend. For me, I just like Texas here. I think there's too much talent on this offense. Ewers, as long as he's comfortable, doesn't make mistakes, he can avoid turnovers. He has 6 interceptions already this season. If he can avoid interceptions on Saturday, I think Texas can run away big winners here at home in DKR. I like this team. I like what they have on defense. I think it's underrated defense. Not a lot of folks talking about it. I think they have potential here to stop Baylor on the run and make Baylor kind of force them to throw and make them uncomfortable, and that will be a key to success for Texas.
Now looking at NC State, North Carolina, this was a great finish last year in the same scenario. Black Friday, NC State was down by double figures late in that game, like 3 minutes to go, and they ended up winning in crazy fashion. This is an interesting game because North Carolina coming off a pretty embarrassing loss to Georgia Tech. They led 17-0 and ended up losing that. They do have Clemson next week in the ACC title game. NC State looking to play spoiler here. This offense, Nick, they have not topped 360 yards since September. Devin Leary went down after that Clemson game, and I think it was after the Clemson game. But regardless, this offense, just after he left, is completely just went downhill. 255 yards against Syracuse. They beat Wake Forest. They only had 325. MJ Morris, he's been doing what he can as a freshman, being forced into action here. 7 touchdowns, 648. He's had 49 rushing attempts for 88 yards. They're just searching here on offense. Before Leary exited, the running game's not been good. Jordan Houston and Demi Sumo, they run hard, but only to the tune of 126 yards per contest. Thayer Thomas is a great receiver. They haven't been able to get Devin Carter really involved. Thomas as well. They love to feed him the ball. This has just been a pretty down year for NC State after Devin Leary got hurt. I feel like their playoff hopes were kind of diminished after they lost to Clemson, which was, this was a team we picked to make the playoffs. Both of us did. I feel like they probably would have had a good shot with this remaining schedule if they had Leary at the helm. But the offense, Nick, been very poor. But now they face a UNC defense that is also not very good. They give up 30 points per game. Something's got to give here. What do you see happening here with this NC State offense against this UNC defense?
It's been bad how bad this UNC defense is. If Eugene Chizik comes out of the studio, comes back to this team to coach this defense, you thought there'd be an improvement considering how poor they were last year. But give up 30 points per game, allowing 273 yards through the air, plus the almost 200 yards on the ground, 180 total, 180 average on the ground. This UNC defense is terrible. The NC State having a freshman at quarterback, losing Leary has certainly derailed this season. I had a lot of high hopes to the Wolfpack. I really thought they were, a playoff contender. Obviously, if I picked them to go to the playoff, and they are certainly trying to turn the season around with the last couple of weeks. But losing to BC and losing to Louisville has not helped them. They're falling they continue to fall in the rankings, even though they beat Wake a few weeks ago. I just think that it's going to be an interesting game. There'll be a lot of points scored. I just think that UNC's offense with Drake May, who we're going to highlight in a second here. I know you want to talk about Drake May, who is certainly lighting up the score chart so far this season. 3,600 yards through the air, 34 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for Drake May, plus the 600 yards on the ground and the 5 scores. I think UNC's offense just has too much talent here, and they're going to absolutely, step on the gas, which is a good NC State defense when you have a guy like Drake May, who is just a total difference maker, plus downs receiving the ball from him. He was 900 yards receiving, plus the 11 touchdowns. I like this NC State's offense, how they've responded, considering the adversity when losing a guy like Leary, who is a team leader, very veteran quarterback. But for me, I think that UNC's defense will get stops when they need to a few times. It certainly didn't happen against Georgia Tech, which concerns me. But I think they have potential here to get a few stops and win this game.
Speaking of Drake May, 383 yards per game this year. Cooled off against Georgia Tech in that game where it just went sideways in the second half for them. The biggest reason I think NC State can keep this game close is this is a great defense for them. 31% opponent third down conversion rate. That is outstanding numbers. Very good secondary, full of veterans. Tanner Ringel, Cyrus Fagan, Derek Pitts, Shaheen Battle. This is a great secondary full of seniors. Drake Thomas, Isaiah Moore, there's some great linebackers, a very good run defense as well. Moore and Thomas both have 12-plus tackle for loss. Peyton Wilson, of course, one of the nation's top trio of linebackers, playing great this year. I love Davin Van in the middle. I think they'll do a good job of making UNC be one-dimensional and have to throw it. And Josh Downs is phenomenal against man coverage, but you're going to see, this is a 3-3-5 defense. It's going to have a lot of zone coverage here against Downs. And, they played very good this year. They gave up 330 yards to Boston College, which is a terrible passing attack, and a loss there. Zay Flowers took over that game, 397 against Wake Forest, but it did force 3 picks. And Wake Forest was down in that game a lot, 48 pass attempts. They've played so good in the secondary this year. They've only given up over 300 yards twice, and it came in those last 2 games where both Boston College and Wake Forest had 48 pass attempts. The offense has just not been able to manufacture much, and it's left them on the field a lot. But I do think they have a great ability to slow down Drake May, and I think they will. So I'm going to cap UNC at 30 points. I think they'll get the job done. UNC, their defense is not good, but I don't see NC State finding an offense either. Something has to give. I think the UNC defense will give it more. So this could be an interesting game, but I'll take UNC. Arkansas and Missouri, Arkansas coming off a major win over Ole Miss, but they still got clobbered, gave up almost 500 yards rushing in that game. Now they're facing a Missouri team that, they've been kind of interesting this season. Brady Cook's having a respectable year. Cody Schrader's emerged at running back. Of course, a couple weeks ago, Nick, they had a very good game against Georgia. They almost took that one away. Nathaniel Pete at running back. They average 151 yards per game. And they face an Arkansas defense. They're outside the top 120 in total defense. This is not a good defense at all for the Hogs. Dominic Lovett's been great at receiver for them. Luther Burden, he's been involved, a true freshman. And then Barrett Bannister, 37 receptions, 400-plus yards. Missouri, I'm not exactly thrilled with this football team, but Arkansas's defense I don't think is anything to really write home about and coming on the road here to end the year. I do think Arkansas will be motivated, but I think Missouri, pretty sure this is a rivalry game. It's played at the same time every single year. But Missouri's taken some big steps against the run this year. They were much better on defense than they were a season ago. They're almost in the nation's worst against the run. This is a defense that's got a number of veterans like Tyrone Hopper, Isaiah McGuire, DJ Coleman. They all want to go out hard on senior day, and I think they will. I'm going to take Missouri 41-31 in a high-scoring affair. KJ Jefferson, and Raheem Sanders. I think they're going to put up, a whale of a fight. I'm going to take Missouri, though, to win this one. How do you feel about this? You're going to lean with the Hogs, who are 4.5-point faves.
I do like the Hogs in this one. I think this Battle Line rivalry is a very underrated rivalry in college football. Certainly, it's got new blood since Missouri joined the SEC, and they play each other every year on Black Friday. I like this matchup. Fun game to watch on Friday. Missouri's been a weird team this year. We didn't have high expectations for them. Eli Drinkwitz, I don't know if he's the best coach for Missouri. He's, certainly the seat's getting warmer for him in Columbia. But then again, there isn't a whole lot you can do considering the recruiting, and he really has got the best recruit he could in Luther Burden, who is getting involved, but just not quite enough in my opinion. Burden, I want to see more from him. Cook, having a solid season considering his ceiling, but the 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions ratio, just really, he's not protecting the ball when he needs to. I love this Arkansas rushing attack. Rocket Sanders, ridiculous on the ground so far this season, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns for him. KJ Jefferson, another great quarterback in the SEC, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, plus 2,449 yards. Arkansas defense isn't great, but I just think that they have a lot of talent on offense. I like the way that they can kind of spread the ball if necessary. And Sanders adds a new dynamic to this offense. He's a great back, great speed, underrated back in the SEC. I'm going to take Arkansas here to win this game. Certainly think it'd be a close game. I think this is one of the more interesting games on the slate that we covered, just because it's a very underrated matchup. But I like Arkansas here. They beat Ole Miss, obviously a solid Ole Miss team. Up and down year for the Hogs, but I think Sam Pittman gets a big win in the rivalry and focuses on getting a bowl win to end the year.
Going to cap things off, Florida State. I love how this game is on Black Friday at night. Florida State 9-point favorites. Florida, they have a phenomenal offensive line, right? But, Florida State, they have some bruisers in the middle. Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton, Malcolm Ray. This is a legit defensive line. Jared Verse, of course, coming off the edge. Florida, their season's been really up and down. Anthony Richardson, phenomenal talent, but, 55% completion rate, 14 touchdowns. He just can't do much as a passer. The running game for Florida is their best shot in this one. Richardson, 9 touchdowns, 613 yards. 9 more scores for Montreal Johnson of his 742. And then Trevor Etienne, 576 on the ground. His debut season went very well. Florida State, though, this game means a lot more to them, I think, than the Gators do. They've just not been playing well the last couple of weeks. The Gators, completely different tune compared to when they beat Utah in week 1. I think Florida State, though, they also have an offense that's also terrific. Jordan Travis, Rashawn Ward, the defense for Florida has really just been all over the place. The last couple of weeks, it's really not been a good unit. They completely stonewalled South Carolina, held them to 6 points. That offense just dropped 60-plus against Tennessee, so that was pretty interesting. That's certainly a pat on the back, limiting them to 237. They lost to Vanderbilt, gave up only 283 to an offense that's not good. But, they gave up 500-plus to LSU, Georgia, Tennessee, some of the better offenses that they have faced all year long, they've had problems with. And Florida State, this is a vertical running game. It's really going to, possess a lot of speed, a lot of misdirection, a lot of efficiency from Jordan Travis, 2,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, only 4 picks for him. Trey Benson's been a great running back for them. This is going to be too much offense here, I think, for Florida State. Florida, I don't know how synced in they're going to be for this one. I think that defensive players will certainly play hard. Some of the veterans on this football team, like Amari Burney, Ventrell Miller, Trey Dean, some of those guys, they're playing probably their last game for the Gators. I think they'll be fired up to play. 34-14 for me. I'm going to take a blowout for the Noles. If they're playing in Gainesville, I think it'd probably be a lot closer score, but I just think Florida's not going to be up for this one. Noles riding to a 20-point victory for me.
I also take the Noles in a big blowout here. Florida State's season started off on a super high note. A team that you and I both thought was very interesting this offseason. I said they might struggle to get 6 wins. I was on the fence about it. They've smashed that number. We talked about this game as a potential game that could decide bowl eligibility for either team. In the end, both teams got to a bowl eligibility. But I love this Florida State team. They've turned around 4 straight wins in a row. 41 points against Georgia Tech, 45 against Miami, 30 against Syracuse, 49 against Louisiana. Lafayette this weekend. I like this team a lot. I love this offense. Jordan Travis having a great season. 2,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Benson, solid year. 850 yards on the ground plus 6 scores. I love this offense, 35 points per game. Defense is not bad either. We wondered how the defense would do. They had a pretty good defense last year. We wonder if they could take a step back. They lost some talent to the NFL draft. 18 points allowed per game. Only allowing 138 yards on the ground per game, plus the 155 yards through the air. I like this Florida State team a lot. Mike Norvell seems to be building something in Tallahassee. This program can be back to national relevance if they finish 9-3 this season in the regular season. I like them to beat Florida here. This is a very interesting matchup. Great game to end the Black Friday slate.
Florida State, 11th in total defense this year. Been a really good team for them. I picked Florida to go 6-6 in the preseason. They said 6-5, but I did pick them to lose to the Noles. So looking for a spot on prediction there. I think the Noles will get the job done for me. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me.
I'm excited. Some of these games on Friday, they wouldn't get a whole lot of attention. They were on Saturday. And look at the Arkansas-Missouri rivalry, Florida State. Some of these games will be overshadowed by bigger games on Saturday. It's nice to get this Friday slate on the weekend. I like this a lot. A lot of great games on Friday.
Black Friday slate is usually one of my favorites on the year. Like you said, some of these games get overshadowed. We get to witness and watch some good football. I think all these games will be really good and really close. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Make sure you tune in next time. See you.